Hey, this is the Amazon Jew coming to you from Casper, Wyoming, inside my little war room. I wanted to do this video today because of all the headlines that are on the news today about Dianne Feinstein sends a secret letter to intelligence to investigate Kavanaugh. What a pathetic piece of shit she is. Think about it. She's been in Congress for 40 plus years and has never, ever done something like this. Okay, they are so worried because the last of their frontier, the Democrats, is the judicial system. They've already taken over the intel and they got busted. They had the White House, the Senate, and the Congress and never ever pulled this kind of crap that they're pulling now. So Dianne Feinstein, you get the big three fuck yous today. We know about your hubby selling off United States Post Office property with his employer and making millions. You are as corrupt as the people you claim to want to investigate. Let's not forget you had your Chinese chauffeur my ass, your confidant for 20 years who had been sending back information to China. Okay, a spy. Then 40 of you Democrats had Ann Juan Williams from Debbie Wasserman Schultz, IT guy, who had access to at least 40 members of the Democrat Party Congress. That's almost every Democrat. There's 49 of them, and he had access to 40 of them. Think about that for a minute. He knew everything, and he sent it all back to Pakistan and sold this information on the open market. But yet Dianne has the nerve to question Kavanaugh's character as a presiding judge on the Supreme Court. Shame on you. There hasn't been any accountability in what either the House or the Senate and the Intel Committee for at least since 1997. And I believe that's probably when most of the corruption began for this next 3 or 4 presidents. Anyway, let's see. I wanted to also say they weaponized the Intel Committee, and that's coming out. Everybody's getting busted. 8 of the top Intel Committee member leaders have been fired, under investigation, and just one was reassigned, which I'm sure he's going to be fired too, since we now know that Orr was involved with the Fusion GPS, that his wife worked for GPS, and they were funneling information back and forth to try to hurt Trump during the campaign and afterwards. We have John Brennan, who has admitted to spying on Americans, and not only spying on Americans, but spying on General Flynn. That was a total setup as well. They had the courts pretty much locked up too. Think about it. All the cases that are against this president and his administration are all done in, they were judge shopping. And they were judge shopping really good to find liberal judges that will, create law from the bench rather than reading the actual law or the Constitution. This has gotten really out of hand. They're calling for active aggressiveness against Republicans and Trump supporters. Think about it. Maxine Waters is talking about running them, following them in crowds and overpowering them. And Tim Kaine said we need to fight them in the streets. You know, what is wrong with these people? They have lost their mind. They're losing their power. And we're getting into finding out where their slush funds are. Well, we know their slush funds were part of the teachers union and part of the government's union. We know that the Consumer Bureau was a creation by Liz Warren, and there was no oversight on it. So it was also a slush fund. That's why they're bitching so bad right now about Mulvaney disbanding the board on that, because they were all inside players, if you want to know the truth, and they were making money off of it, you know, and this money was also going to liberal groups to sue the government and to try to push more of this socialism and abortion and all of this stuff. We were allowing the Democrats to have free reign over an agency that had no oversight. So this is to Liz Warren. Fuck you. You're busted. No more money coming from there. There's also no more money coming from the Justice Department. Jeff Sessions did that right at the start, and I have to give him credit for that. You no longer have a slush fund in the Justice Department. Now, if we can take care of the slush funds in the teachers' unions and police unions and things like that, Democrats would dry up and blow away. Because if you look at the map on Republic versus Democrats, Democrats hold the large cities, which are poverty, run by Democrats, overtaxed, overburdened, guns, illegals, drugs, human trafficking, all happens in these cities that are controlled by the Democrats. Okay, so if you don't think you need to get out there and vote, just like you did in 2018 or 2016 for President Trump, you need to vote again, because he cannot do this on his own. And as we know, there are a lot of forces working against him. The media works against him. They are all bought and paid for whores of the Democrat Party. It's hard to find any truth out there, and if there is truth out there, the internet has now become a censorship where they will kick you off. This is my third account for my Twitter and my YouTube. I've been pretty safe on because I stay under the radar. But as far as Twitter, I've been kicked off 3 or 4 times. I've been locked out just for posting the truth or passing on a funny cartoon. I mean, they're out to shut down the conservative vote. They want socialism in this country. They want open borders so that their districts get bigger and they get more representation in the House and the Senate. That's their ultimate goal on that front. Then with voting fraud, they don't want voter ID, because if you did that, then you could find out if somebody's voting twice or if they're an illegal alien. They want to stop the census from asking if you're a United States citizen. This is an absolute must that should be put on the Census Bureau. We want to know how many illegals are actually in this country. And we want to know if they're voting, because if they're voting and they're in this country illegally, they're fucking up our system. And they're watering down our vote. And they're watering down our districts. And that is not right. We are a free country, and we should remain that way. We are a republic, not a democratic country. And I don't care if Hillary won the popular vote. That doesn't count. It's the electoral vote that counts, and that's how our founders put it together. And as for Kavanaugh, now I don't know about you guys and how much you watched of it, but I watched that guy that was the Parkland shooter's son, or Parkland's, his kid got killed down there, and he maneuvered his way through the crowd to get up to Kavanaugh. Okay, now you got to remember, this room was as hostile as I've ever seen, as anyone has ever seen. It was totally out of control. And Senator Grassley, I love you to death, but you had no control over that room. I can remember a time when somebody interrupted in one of your committees, and you were chairing it, and you threw their ass out. Why didn't you throw out these people? Okay. Well, anyway, the Parkland the Parkland's dad rushes up to Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh don't know who he is. I didn't know who he was. I mean, frankly, he's just like a face of a million other faces to me. But anyway, he rushed up to Kavanaugh, and to me, that creates a problem, because they've already been threatening us. They've already tried to kill Scalise. They've already tried riots in the streets. They endorse the Antifa that is tearing down businesses and breaking windows and being destructive. They're a goddamn terrorist group. Okay, you don't want to talk about the white supremacists. You know why? Because they're not the ones doing this shit. It's your Antifa. It's the ones that are being backed by the Democrat Party and George Soros. And you know what? We've got to do something about it. I don't care. Call out the National Guard when these guys get together. Let's see how many snowflakes stick around when the tear gas starts coming at them and real men start busting their heads. Okay, this shit's got to stop. We cannot go on with this civil discourse and allowing Black Lives Matter and Antifa and the Women's March and all of these crazy pussy hat wearing sons of bitches to control our country. This is a nation of laws, and they must follow the laws just like you and I do. And anyway, so I put together this video in the beginning, and I wanted to make sure that we knew there's no accountability. I don't remember a single one of Hillary Clinton's or James Clapper or James Comey or any of those guys being cited on the Hatch Act or lying to Congress. In fact, I can go back as far as Eric Holder, who actually lied to Congress as well, and he was never prosecuted for it. It's time that the Congress got their balls in a group and decided if they were going to follow the law or not. If they're not going to follow the law, then what do we need with Congress? They are just a mouthpiece. They are just sit up there grandstanding, and they do nothing. They follow through on absolutely nothing. We've lost some good guys this year in the Republican Party, and we need to make sure that we are electing responsible adults, not these crazy left-wing nutbags who think that the border should be open and it's a free-for-all for everyone and, you know, socialistic medicine. These people have lost their fucking minds. And you need to realize that, because it's up to us. We're the last generation, us 50-year-olds and 40-year-olds that know that they are trying to change history. They are trying to change our country. They are trying to drain our wealth. They are trying to drain our jobs. They are doing what they call redistribution of wealth, and they want urban centers. And an urban center, all you need to do is look up Agenda 21 in the New World Order, and it will wake your eyes up. Look up a gal called Rosa Kohr and Tom DeWeese. If you don't think that they have a New World Order going, that the United States was supposed to be just one country amongst 100 of them, and we're supposed to keep supplying all the money until we're drained so that other countries can benefit and come up in their economy. Well, you know what? Fuck their economy. I worry about our economy. I worry about our children. I worry about our citizens. United States America. Okay? United States of America. One nation under God. That's my country. I am not New World Order. I am not a liberal. I am not a Democrat. I'm not an independent. I am an American, and I demand justice for all of the corruption in D.C.
To protect the integrity of the special counsel. Today, under current Department of Justice regulations, the special counsel, as everybody knows, cannot be fired for anything but misconduct, dereliction of duty, incapacity, conflict of interest, or other good cause. Could we go yes or no down the line?
Certainly not the first, certainly not 1735.
I'm sorry, Professor. Thank you.
Certainly not 1735, which requires on its face that the executive branch go to the judiciary in order to get permission to remove. The independent counsel statute did not have that structure. Instead, the Attorney General issued the order of removal, him or herself.
Okay, and 1735, just so everybody, is Graham, Booker, Whitehouse, and Blumenthal.
That's, yeah.
Mr. Vladek?
I mean, I think that is what Professor Duffy mentions is the only respect in which I think either of these bills is more of an intrusion than the independent counsel statute. I mentioned in my testimony, I think there are three critical substantive ways in which it's much less intrusive. The Attorney General has control over the appointment, the scope of the investigation, and the initial removal decision. So I think it's actually much narrower in all three of those respects, all three of which Justice Scalia relied upon in his Morrison dissent as problems with the independent counsel statute.
Mr. Posner?
1741 is clearly narrower than the independent counsel statute.
Let's see, which one? 1741.
That's with the...
Tillis?
Yes, Tillis Coons. And then 1735, in my view, is also narrower because, as I mentioned earlier, I don't think these judicial review provisions, as a practical matter, will make much difference.
Do you believe it's constitutional?
Yes.
Both?
Both are constitutional.
Professor?
In general, both are considerably narrower. There is the technical issues that Professor Duffy raised, but I don't think those are of the essence. Those could be tweaked. So in general, it is narrower, but still unconstitutional, in my view and as I count votes.
Statute on the books is unconstitutional.
The statute lapsed, Senator, in 1999, the ethics and it lapsed because Janet Reno then Attorney General, came...
This guy's had too much coffee today.
...came before the Senate of the United States, and if I could just tell you what she told this body, because it's actually pretty important, and it's in a note in my testimony. And she had originally supported the Ethics in Government Act in 1978, and she came reluctantly to the position, and this is very much where I am, that it's unconstitutional. Here's what she testified on March 17th, 1999, quote, "After working with the Act, I've come to believe, after much reflection and with great reluctance, that the Independent Counsel Act is structurally flawed and that these flaws cannot be corrected within our constitutional framework. The Independent Counsel is vested with the full gamut of prosecutorial powers, but with little of its accountability. He has not been confirmed by the Senate. Accountability is no small matter. It goes to the very heart of our constitutional scheme. Our founders believed that the enormity of prosecutorial power and all decisions about who and what and whether to prosecute should be vested in one who is responsible to the people. That way," quote, and this is all a quote, "and here I'm paraphrasing Justice Scalia's dissent in Morrison v. Olson, whether we're talking about over-prosecuting or under-prosecuting, the blame can be assigned to someone who can be politically punished." So that's why, that was her testimony, that bill was flagrantly unconstitutional and it lapsed thanks to a sunset provision, as Professor Posner mentions in his testimony.
Now, I'm a non-attorney, so I'm going to put it in non-attorney language.
Sure.
Which bill between Graham Booker and Tillis Coons do you believe is the soundest on the basis of constitutionality? And I'm going to go down the row with this, and being able to carry out its purpose properly.
I think neither, because I think both would be judicially invalidated. So you're not going to...
We have nothing.
If working with these, I offer a different way of skinning the cat.
Okay, let's go down the line, because I don't want my time to run out. Mr. Posner.
They're both valid under the Constitution. I think they're equivalent. If I had to choose one, I would choose the Tillis Coons one, because it avoids this judicial issue that people have mentioned. But I think they would both easily be upheld by the Supreme Court.
Mr. Leidig?
I agree. I would just say, in my testimony to Senator, I actually proposed a slight tweak to Graham Booker that would avoid the Article 3 problem that I think my colleague was just referring to. I think the real question, if you, like Professor Posner and I, think they're both...
In case you guys haven't figured this out yet and you don't watch a lot of these hearings, well, I do. What they were doing here was trying to legislate a protection mechanism for Bob Mueller in his investigation. Okay, that's what they were doing here. The Democrats were really, really trying with two different bills. And this Professor Stephen L. Vladeck and the other guy who had too much coffee. But this is what they're doing. They go to the committees and they come up with ways to try to fuck the president right now, is what they're trying to do. And protect Mueller, because that's the only egg in the basket they have, is if Mueller can come up with a way to impeach or remove Donald Trump from the presidency. And this wasn't too long ago. Back in 2017, Congress examines firing Robert Mueller as special counsel. Okay, 9/26/17, and that's what they're trying to do here. Is they're trying to figure out a way to protect Bob Mueller. So let's skip ahead and see what they come up with. We'll go up to, I think Lindsey Graham can probably put a pretty good lid on this, so let's find him. Here's Lindsey.
Republican. I want to make sure Mr. Mueller does his job. If he gets off script and if he does something wrong, there will be a way to look at what he's doing. He's not above the law either. But I just want everybody in America to know that he's going to do his job without fear of reprisal. He's going to do his job, protected as much as we can by a legal process. This is not about President Trump. It's about any president at any time in the future being able to be held accountable as an individual. And there's nothing more important to me than to say, without hesitation, that everybody in America, including the president, is under scrutiny when there's an allegation they may have done something wrong. And that's what this is all about.
Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Professor Amar, welcome.
Now listen to this clown. I cannot stand Senator Whitehouse. He is a grandstand, does nothing, never passed one single bill in his entire career. Just one of the establishment Democrat rats is what he is. watch him a few times in committee, and sometimes you can tell he doesn't know shit what he's talking about. Everything he reads that's in front of him is what his staff put together. The man does no research on his own. He doesn't read the bills. He relies on summaries from fucking 20-year-old kids reading whatever bills are sent his way.
You say in your written testimony, and I'm quoting here, the power to pardon subsumes the lesser power to decline prosecution for any number of reasons. Can this lesser power you describe be regularized by the president into policy so that the folks who are actually enforcing the laws have a specific direction from the president as to that lesser power to decline prosecution?
Yes, and it's typically subject to revision. So, for example, President Obama could basically say, we're not going to pardon people who violate, arguably, federal laws in Colorado on possession of marijuana.
So it's subject to revision, but
Yes.
it's not unconstitutional for a president to say we're not going to prosecute, for instance, the DACA kids.
And DACA is a little trickier because it's not on the criminal side fully. Some of that is civil non-enforcement, but...
And this is another issue I take too. Illegal aliens, not the DACA kids. They're here. We may as well just... in fact, Trump offered, what was it, 1.8 million of them to go ahead and find a way to path to citizenship. And he came up with a really good bill. Maybe I should show that to you. And the Democrats voted it down. They voted that down. They voted repeal of health care. They voted down tax breaks for the middle class and business, reparations of bringing home their money without being charged through the roof. You know, so much damage the Democrats have caused over the years. It's going to take decades to set things right. This is why it's really, really important that people get out and vote. I mean, I'm serious. If you don't get out there and vote to get these people out of office that are obstructionists, and that's what they are, plain and simple.
You about a year ago, and that was the matter of surveillance, and particularly what the rules are that an intelligence agency would have to follow in order to electronically track the movements and locations of an American inside the United States. And I asked you about this a year ago, and you said that your lawyers were studying this, and I hope that since a year has passed, we can get some answers to these questions. So first, let me ask the question, if an intelligence agency wants to electronically track the movements and whereabouts of an American inside the United States, how much evidence do they need?
Well, first of all, let me just say, sir, that particularly in the case of NSA and CIA, there are strictures against...
You see who's sitting next to Clapper? Mr. Bob Mueller himself. This video is from 2013. So that tells you then they knew they were spying, and that's when this weaponizing began.
It's tracking American citizens in the United States for foreign intelligence purposes, and that's what those agencies are set up to do. I think, though, when I might ask Director Mueller to speak to this, because what you're referring to is, I think, devolves into the law enforcement criminal area. So,
let me, and I do want to hear from Director Mueller, but I'm trying to get some general principles out with respect to intelligence, and you've cited certainly some areas that are relevant, but what I'm really trying to do is get an unclassified answer to a question about what the law authorizes.
the law is, of course, as you know, is embedded in the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which was recently, the amendment and to which was recently extended for 5 years. And it places very strict strictures on the intelligence community's tracking of U.S. persons where there is a terrorism nexus. And that is overseen very strictly by both the FISA court as well as within the executive branch, both by my office and the Attorney General. So there are very strict rules about that, as you know, as we've discussed.
But as you know, there are some fundamental questions about the balance between security and liberty that transcend just the FISA question. So what I would like to do is see if we can get a direct answer to the question about when the intel community needs to get a warrant, for example, when a lesser amount of evidence would do, and second, the circumstances when no specific evidence is needed at all. And the FISA law does not specify whether a warrant is required. So that's the reason that I'm asking the question. I asked it a year ago.
I'd like to ask Director Mueller to help me with that question.
And Mr. Director, I'm anxious to hear from Director Mueller, who I greatly respect, but I also need to hear from you with respect to the intelligence community. That's why I asked it a year ago.
As I said, Senator Wyden, in the case of the CIA and NSA, who were engaged in foreign intelligence collection, that's a practice they do not engage in.
Director Mueller?
Well, Senator, you're talking, well, let me start by saying that there's no real distinction in what we do between the criminal and the national security. If we require it in criminal side, we require national security, and we treat them the same. There is no distinction between our intelligence cases in terms of undertaking the activity you suggest and our criminal cases. That being said, in the wake of the Jones decision, which I'm sure you're familiar with, that is put some things in an area where we're waiting to see where the courts go. But obviously they said if you were going to trespass to install a device, then that requires a warrant. The standard on that warrant is still up in the air. And consequently, to give you a more precise answer to a particular question on a particular monitoring, I would have to be more factually based and then apply the law to that particular set of facts.
Director Mueller, you have identified the exact reason why I'm trying to get an answer from Director Clapper, because there's no question we are going to watch what the courts do in the days ahead. The question is, what will be the rights of Americans while that is still being fleshed out? And the fact is, FISA does not specify whether a warrant is required. And I know I'm out of time for this round. I just want you to know, Director Clapper, respectfully, I will be asking this question of you, just like we did with respect to the legal documents for targeted killings, which we finally got after 7 requests over a 2-year period, until we get an answer.
That they're pulling now. So, Dianne Feinstein, you get the big 3 fuck yous today. We know about your hubby selling off United States Post Office property with his employer and making millions. You are as corrupt as the people you claim to want to investigate. Let's not forget you had your Chinese chauffeur my ass, your confidant for 20 years who had been sending back information to China. Okay, a spy. Then 40 of you Democrats had Anwan Williams from Debbie Wasserman Schultz, IT guy, who had access to at least 40 members of the Democrat Party Congress. That's almost every Democrat. There's 49 of them. And he had access to 40 of them. Think about that for a minute. He knew everything, and he sent it all back to Pakistan and sold this information on the open market. But yet Dianne has the nerve to question Kavanaugh's character as a presiding judge on the Supreme Court. Shame on you. There hasn't been any accountability in what either the House or the Senate and the Intel Committee for at least since 1997. And I believe that's probably when most of the corruption began for this next 3 or 4 presidents. Anyway, let's see. I wanted to also say they weaponized the Intel Committee, and that's coming out. Everybody's getting busted. 8 of the top Intel Committee member leaders have been fired, under investigation, and just 1 was reassigned, which I'm sure he's going to be fired too, since we now know that Orr was involved with the Fusion GPS, that his wife worked for GPS, and they were funneling information back and forth to try to hurt Trump during the campaign and afterwards. We have John Brennan, who is admitted to spying on Americans, and not only spying on Americans, but spying on General Flynn. That was a total setup as well. They had the courts pretty much locked up too. Think about it. All the cases that are against this president and his administration are all done in, they were judge shopping. And they were judge shopping really good to find liberal judges that will, how do you say it, create law from the bench rather than reading the actual law or the Constitution. This has gotten really out of hand. They're calling for active aggressiveness against Republicans and Trump supporters. Think about it. Maxine Waters is talking about running them, following them in crowds and overpowering them. And Tim Kaine said we need to fight them in the streets. You know, what is wrong with these people? They have lost their mind. They're losing their power. And we're getting into finding out where their slush funds are. Well, we know their slush funds were part of the teachers union and part of the government's union. We know that the Consumer Bureau was a creation by Liz Warren, and there was no oversight on it. So it was also a slush fund. That's why they're bitching so bad right now about Mulvaney disbanding the board on that, because they were all inside players, if you want to know the truth. And they were making money off of it, you know, and this money was also going to liberal groups to sue the government and to try to push more of this socialism and abortion and all of this stuff. We were allowing the Democrats to have free reign over an agency that had no oversight. So this is to Liz Warren. Fuck you. You're busted. No more money coming from there. There's also no more money coming from the Justice Department. Jeff Sessions did that right at the start, and I have to give him credit for that. You no longer have a slush fund in the Justice Department. Now, if we can take care of the slush funds in the teachers unions and police unions and things like that, Democrats would dry up and blow away. Because if you look at the map on Republic versus Democrats, Democrats hold the large cities, which are poverty, run by Democrats, overtaxed, overburdened, guns, illegals, drugs, human trafficking, all happens in these cities that are controlled by the Democrats. Okay, so if you don't think you need to get out there and vote, just like you did in 2018 or 2016 for President Trump, you need to vote again, because he cannot do this on his own. And as we know, there are a lot of forces working against him. The media works against him. They are all bought and paid for whores of the Democrat Party. It's hard to find any truth out there. And if there is truth out there, the internet has now become a censorship where they will kick you off. This is my third account for my Twitter and my YouTube. I've been pretty safe on because I stay under the radar. But as far as Twitter, I've been kicked off 3 or 4 times. I've been locked out just for posting the truth or passing on a funny cartoon. I mean, they're out to shut down the conservative vote. They want socialism in this country. They want open borders so that their districts get bigger and they get more representation in the House and the Senate. That's their ultimate goal on that front. Then with voting fraud, they don't want voter ID, because if you did that, then you could find out if somebody's voting twice or if they're an illegal alien. They want to stop the census from asking if you're a United States citizen. This is an absolute must that should be put on the Census Bureau. We want to know how many illegals are actually in this country. And we want to know if they're voting, because if they're voting and they're in this country illegally, they're fucking up our system. And they're watering down our vote. And they're watering down our districts. And that is not right. We are a free country, and we should remain that way. We are a republic, not a democratic country. And I don't care if Hillary won the popular vote. That doesn't count. It's the electoral vote that counts, and that's how our founders put it together. And as for Kavanaugh, now I don't know about you guys and how much you watched of it, but I watched that guy that was the Parkland shooter's son, or Parkland's, his kid got killed down there, and he maneuvered his way through the crowd to get up to Kavanaugh. Okay, now you got to remember, this room was as hostile as I've ever seen, as anyone has ever seen. It was totally out of control. And Senator Grassley, I love you to death, but you had no control over that room. I can remember a time when somebody interrupted in one of your committees, and you were chairing it, and you threw their ass out. Why didn't you throw out these people? Okay. Well, anyway, the Parkland the Parkland's dad rushes up to Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh don't know who he is. I didn't know who he was. I mean, frankly, he's just like a face of a million other faces to me. But anyway, he rushed up to Kavanaugh, and to me, that creates a problem because they've already been threatening us. They've already tried to kill Scalise. They've already tried riots in the streets. They endorse the Antifa that is tearing down businesses and breaking windows and being destructive. They're a goddamn terrorist group. Okay, you don't want to talk about the white supremacists. You know why? Because they're not the ones doing this shit. It's your Antifa. It's the ones that are being backed by the Democrat Party and George Soros. And you know what? We've got to do something about it. I don't care. Call out the National Guard when these guys get together. Let's see how many snowflakes stick around when the tear gas starts coming at them and real men start busting their heads. Okay, this shit's got to stop. We cannot go on with this civil discourse and allowing Black Lives Matter and Antifa and the Women's March and all of these crazy pussy hat wearing sons of bitches to control our country. This is a nation of laws, and they must follow the laws just like you and I do. And anyway, so I put together this video in the beginning, and I wanted to make sure that we knew there's no accountability. I don't remember a single one of Hillary Clinton's or James Clapper or James Comey or any of those guys being cited on the Hatch Act or lying to Congress. In fact, I can go back as far as Eric Holder, who actually lied to Congress as well, and he was never prosecuted for it. It's time that the Congress got their balls in a group and decided if they were going to follow the law or not. If they're not going to follow the law, then what do we need with Congress? They are just a mouthpiece. They are just sit up there grandstanding, and they do nothing. They follow through on absolutely nothing. We've lost some good guys this year in the Republican Party, and we need to make sure that we are electing responsible adults, not these crazy left-wing nutbags who think that the border should be open and it's a free-for-all for everyone and, you know, socialistic medicine. These people have lost their fucking minds. And you need to realize that because it's up to us. We're the last generation, us 50-year-olds and 40-year-olds that know that they are trying to change history. They are trying to change our country. They are trying to drain our wealth. They are trying to drain our jobs. They are doing what they call redistribution of wealth, and they want urban centers. And an urban center, all you need to do is look up Agenda 21 in the New World Order, and it will wake your eyes up. Look up a gal called Rosa Kohr and Tom DeWeese. If you don't think that they have a New World Order going, that the United States was supposed to be just one country amongst 100 of them, and we're supposed to keep supplying all the money until we're drained so that other countries can benefit and come up in their economy. Well, you know what? Fuck their economy. I worry about our economy. I worry about our children. I worry about our citizens. United States America. Okay? United States of America. One nation under God. That's my country. I am not New World Order. I am not a liberal. I am not a Democrat. I'm not an independent. I am an American, and I demand justice for all of the corruption in D.C. So let's look at some of these videos that I've taken and added on to mine, just so you get an idea of just how much corruption and lies go on and how far back it really goes. To me, we haven't had a real president in 40 years.
No, it's not.
And then explain 44. I have it in front of me, but go ahead.
Yes, in 44 they found that former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, now a CNN national security analyst, provided inconsistent testimony to the committee about his contacts with the media, including CNN. In other words, that's a nice way of saying that Clapper lied.
And he's lying, but this is highly classified. If they're explaining these, we're back to U.S. U.S. Code 18793 again. Now it's all of them seem to be in trouble. All of them seem to be in trouble for the same thing. Leaking intelligence, also lying about all of it, which I guess maybe explains why they wanted Hillary Clinton off the hook. Sarah.
Well, this is so important because you're absolutely right. It's detrimental to national security. If you remember, Sean, I reported in early March about Clapper and his connections to CNN and how the congressional committees were very concerned about this fact. And not only that, Clapper came out shortly after after he made obviously leaked all this information not only to CNN but to other journalists. That's what they discovered in this report as well.
Action I took between July 31st and August 8th. How many interviews did you conduct related to the alleged collusion between Russia and the Trump campaign?
Congressman, as you know, counsel for the FBI, based on the special counsel's equities, has instructed me not to answer questions about the ongoing investigation.
I'm asking for a number.
Russian attempts to
Agent.
interfere.
You are under subpoena and are required to answer the question. Are you objecting to the question? If so, please state your objection.
Mr. Chairman, I object. I do not believe I am here under subpoena. I believe I am here voluntarily.
Chairman. Will you answer the committee's question as directed, or do you refuse to answer the committee's question?
Mr. Chairman, I move to adjourn.
Second, you're not recognized for that purpose, and you will be subject to recall to allow the committee to consider proceeding with a contempt citation.
Your testimony is Bob Mueller did not kick you off because of the content of your text. He kicked you off because of some appearance that he was worried about.
I'm stating to you it is not my understanding that he kicked me off because of any bias, that it was done based on the appearance. If you want to represent what you said accurately, I'm happy to answer that question, but I don't appreciate what was originally said being changed.
Hoped ahead of time. They would like to believe their own news when the Russians proclaim we're not in Ukraine and we're not in Syria, and they are, and it'd be nice if we could, as he said, watch my lips and know that he's not trying to deceive our audiences. My question is, first, why did he think he could get away with it this time? This is not new for the Russians. They've done this for a long time across Europe, but it was much more engaging this time in our election. Why now? Mr. Watson.
I think this answer is very simple and is what no one is really saying in this room, which is part of the reason active measures have worked in this U.S. election is because the commander-in-chief has used Russian active measures at time against his opponents. On 14 August 2016, his campaign chairman, after a debunked incident.
When you say his, who's his?
Paul Manafort cited the fake Incirlik story as a terrorist attack on CNN, and he used it as a talking point. On 11 October, President Trump stood on a stage and cited what appears to be a fake news story from Sputnik News that disappeared from the internet. He denies the intel from the United States. He claimed that the election could be rigged. That was the #1 theme pushed by RT, Sputnik News, white outlets, all the way up until the election. He's made claims of voter.
Then prove where Project Veritas is wrong. They have actual footage of DNC high-ups rigging fucking ballot boxes. So Clinton Watts, you're a lying son of a bitch. You're an establishment boy.
Fraud, that President Obama is not a citizen, that, Congressman Cruz is not a citizen. So part of the reason active measures works, and it does today in terms of Trump Tower being wiretapped, is because they parrot the same law.
Look at how he threw that in there. Oh, no, Trump Tower never happened. No, they never did bug Trump Tower.
Congress has the right to know about it. As I believe Senator Tillis implied this morning, if the president felt comfortable sharing this information with the Russians, surely he feels comfortable sharing it with the Congress of the United States of America. I'm pleased that several of our Republican colleagues have also called on the White House to allow Congress to access transcripts of the meeting, but we need more of our Republican colleagues to speak out. This is not normal behavior. This is not how a White House should operate. Firing an FBI director who is investigating the president's campaign, disclosing classified information to a country that wishes us harm and just finished undermining the integrity of our elections.
What did you tell the White House about Mr. Flynn?
I had 2 in-person meetings and 1 phone call with the White House counsel about Mr. Flynn. The first meeting occurred on January 26th. I called Don McGahn first thing that morning and told him that I had a very sensitive matter that I needed to discuss with him, that I couldn't talk about it on the phone, and that I needed to come see him. And he agreed to meet with me later that afternoon. I took a senior member of the National Security Division who was overseeing this matter.
Who was it?
To meet with Mr. McGahn. We met in his office at the White House, which is a SCIF, so we could discuss classified information in his office. We began our meeting telling him that there had been press accounts of statements from the Vice President and others that related conduct that Mr. Flynn had been involved in that we knew not to be the truth. And as I tell you what happened here, again, I'm going to be very careful not to reveal classified
Well, the reason you knew it wasn't true is because you had collected some intelligence from an incidental collection system. Is that fair to say?
And I can't answer that because that, again, would call me for me to reveal classified.
Let me ask you this. Did anybody ever make a request to unmask the conversation between the Russian ambassador and Mr. Flynn?
And again, Senator, I can't answer a question like that that would call for classified information.
The case?
I don't.
Is there a way to find that out?
Well, in another setting, it could be discussed.
But there is a record somewhere of who would make a request to unmask the conversation with General Flynn and the Russian ambassador.
Well,
if one was made, there'd be a record of it.
I can't speak to this specific case, but I...
Avoid. Look at him. He's just fucking as guilty as sin, man.
I can generally comment that in the case of 702 requests, yes. Those are all documented.
Okay.
There's much more, but we find out, and there's an article in the American Thinker by Daniel John Sabisky, and it talks about uranium-1, and it says back in July, I called for a criminal investigation into Hillary Clinton's collusion with Russia to turn over control of 20% of our uranium supplies to Russian interests in return for some $145 million in donations to the Clinton Foundation. Now it turns out there was one. An FBI investigation dating back to 2009 with current Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein and Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller up to their eyeballs in covering up evidence of Hillary's collusion bordering on treason with Vladimir Putin's Russia. Prior to the Obama administration approving the very controversial deal in 2010, giving Russia 20% of America's uranium, the FBI had evidence that Russian nuclear industry officials were involved in bribery, kickbacks, extortion, and money laundering in order to benefit Vladimir Putin, says a report by The Hill. John Solomon, Allison Spann of The Hill, federal agent, said this: federal agents used confidential U.S. witness working inside the Russian nuclear industry to gather extensive financial records, make secret recordings, and intercept emails as early as 2009 that showed Moscow had compromised an American uranium trucking firm with bribes and kickbacks in violation of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, FBI and court documents show. So from today's report, we find out that the investigation was supervised by then U.S. Attorney Rod Rosenstein, who is now President Trump's Deputy Attorney General, and then Assistant FBI Director Andrew McCabe, who is now the Deputy FBI Director under Trump. Robert Mueller was head of the FBI from 2001 through September 2013 until James Comey took over as FBI Director in 2013. They were both involved in this Russian scam, being that this case started in 2009 and ended in 2015. And let me insert parenthetically, Mr. Speaker, I don't know who recommended that the U.S. attorney investigating Russian collusion with Hillary Clinton and with the trucking firm, with others here in the United States. But whoever recommended Rod Rosenstein to President Trump as Deputy Attorney General should be fired. And makes some interesting observation. At the conclusion, he says, actually, we no longer need an investigation of Hillary Clinton and Uranium One. This FBI investigation, in conjunction to what we already know, is prima facie evidence of criminal corruption and intentional putting of American national security at risk for personal financial gain. Then this article from Lee Smith, March 13th, titled Robert Mueller's Beltway Cover-Up. And this points out that if the deep state here, and it does cross party lines, they wanted somebody to effectively cover up all of the leaks, each one of which is a crime punishable by time in prison. If the deep state here in Washington wanted somebody that could protect all these criminals that are working in intelligence or FBI that regularly leak information to hurt people that threaten their power here in Washington, then they could not have a better person as special counsel than Robert Mueller, as overseen by Rod Rosenstein. Points out that Mueller took his job not at the behest of the man who by all accounts is likely to professionally and personally disdain Donald Trump, but of the blue chip Beltway elite of which he is a charter member. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein appointed him nearly a year ago to lead an investigation without parameters. That's because Mueller's job is to obscure the abuses of the U.S. surveillance apparatus that occurred under the Obama administration. The fact that someone at the level of former FBI director was called in to sweep up the mess left by bad actors in the Bureau and Central Intelligence Agency and other parts of the intelligence bureaucracy suggests that the problems are even worse than previously thought. And that means the constituency for Mueller's political intervention is enormous. Mueller is said to believe that Eric Prince meeting he's referencing back in January 2017 with a Russian banker, that would be well after the election obviously, was set up to set up a back channel with the Kremlin. But that makes no sense. According to the foundational text of the collusion narrative, the dossier allegedly written by former British spy Christopher Steele, the Kremlin had cultivated Trump himself for years. So what's the purpose of a back channel when supposedly Vladimir Putin already had a key to the front door of Mar-a-Lago? Further, the collusion thesis holds that the Trump circle teamed with high-level Russian officials for the purpose of winning the 2016 election. How does a meeting that Eric Prince had a week before Trump's inauguration advance the crooked election victory plot? It doesn't. It contradicts it. Eric Prince may well be involved in questionable practices that would make people's blood run cold, and he talks some about Eric Prince, but the idea that whenever anyone who supported Trump or even voted for him met with a Russian national, the dish on the menu was treason is the stuff of Cold War B movies. But it's also evidence of something more than prosecutorial overreach. The fact that Mueller has zeroed in on Prince points to a key motive behind his ongoing investigation. And he talks about Prince thrown into the middle of Russiagate after April 3rd, 2017, Washington Post reported his meeting with the Russian banker. But how did anyone know about the meeting? After the story came out, Prince said he was shown specific evidence by sources from the intelligence community that the information was swept up in the collection of electronic communications and his identity was unmasked. The U.S. official or officials who gave his name to the Washington Post broke the law when they leaked classified information. And then on further, it says Mueller presumably knows whether Prince's name was indeed unmasked and then leaked to the press, and that the leak was a crime.
The administration is reviewing the status of 9 clearances. Now, with the help of our good friend, Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett, let's break down why each of the people you see on the screen should be in serious jeopardy of losing their secret access. Tonight, we start with James Clapper. Without a doubt, he should be stripped of his security clearance as soon as humanly possible. He, like Brennan, also misuses his clearance to validate and also monetize his hatred of President Trump every time he's on TV. Brennan on Conspiracy TV, MSNBC, Clapper doing the same thing on fake news CNN. Take a look.
The values, standards, the institutions that I and others spent the major part of our professional lives defending and upholding are under assault by our very own president. That I really do wonder whether the Russians have something on him.
I really question his ability to, his fitness to be in this office. And I also am beginning to wonder about his motivation for it. This past weekend is illustrative of what a great case officer Vladimir Putin is. He knows how to handle an asset, and that's what he's doing with the president.
Now, that's not the only reason Clapper should forfeit his clearance. Now, before his time at Fake News CNN, while serving as the Director of National Intelligence, well, Clapper was accused of leaking sensitive information to his future employer, CNN, the company that employs him now. And let's not forget when Clapper lied under oath in front of Congress. Take a look.
Does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
It does not.
Not wittingly. There are cases where they could inadvertently, perhaps, collect, but not wittingly.
Now, of course, we know that the exact opposite is true. The NSA was collecting the data. He knew about it. Next, let's turn to Jimmy Comey. Yeah, his access is already gone, but he's still eligible for future access. And as Greg Jarrett lists multiple reasons, Comey should be permanently losing his eligibility, including his improper conduct in the Clinton investigation, the fact that he stole government property. Remember the handwritten memos about the president?
You know, that was always really funny to me because I can remember Democrats going, oh, Comey was such a meticulous memo keeper and writer, and he kept records on everything. Where's Obama records? Where's Bush records? Nobody seems to ask that question. I'd like to.
Remember, he leaked that potentially classified information, those memos, to a professor friend to give to the New York Times. And he also likely misled the FISA court about the Steele dossier that he was supposed to verify and never did. And then he lied about that during his book tour. We'll remind you.
You called the dossier unverified, salacious. Why did you use that to the FISA court to ask for surveillance for Carter Page? Not only use it, but you led with it. A bulk of that FISA application deals with that dossier. Why?
Yeah, that's not my recollection, Brett. And I don't know that the FISA application has been released. My recollection was it was part of a broader mosaic of facts that were laid before the FISA judge to obtain a FISA warrant.
There was a lot more than the dossier in the FISA application?
My recollection was there was a significant amount of additional material about Page and why there was probable cause to believe he was an agent of a foreign power. And the dossier was part of that, but was not all of it or a critical part of it. It's my recollection.
Unreal. We now know the dossier did, in fact, make up the bulk of the application. It's an irrefutable fact at this point. Next up, well, let's look at Peter Strzok. He was also fired for improper conduct. His extreme bias, his willingness to act on that bias is a reason alone. He should never have a clearance again. We also have his mistress, Lisa Page, the one-time FBI lawyer, also complicit as it relates to Strzok's bias and his attempts to, quote, stop it, meaning stop Trump from ever becoming president. And then, of course, the insurance policy. And then there's Andrew McCabe. He was fired for lying. He was also involved in signing off on that fake FISA application that willfully misled FISA court judges, by the way, and the American people. And we got Sally Yates also fired for insubordination. She signed off on one of the FISA applications. Susan Rice, she lied all over the place, over and over, about Benghazi when they knew better. A matter of national security. Really? Knowingly? Lying? Get rid of her clearance. Next, you got Michael Hayden. Greg Jarrett is calling his security clearance case, quote, questionable. But remember, Hayden is currently employed by CNN as a talking head. Yep. And finally, we end on Bruce Orr. He was once the 4th highest ranking member of the DOJ before being demoted twice. Why? For failing to disclose his wife's employment at Fusion GPS. We can add Christopher Steele to the mix now. In fact, Orr was actively working on an investigation into Trump-Russia collusion while his wife was being paid by the Clinton campaign to dig up dirt on Trump. Orr appears also to have filed a false financial disclosure report in order to prevent the government from knowing the true nature of his wife's work. In moments, Greg Jarrett will join us with more analysis, but without a doubt, the Trump administration was right in the case of Brennan and now should revoke all of these clearances as soon as possible.
Business or proceedings of the Senate, including the business and proceedings of the committees, subcommittees, and offices of the Senate, shall be liable, if a senator, to suffer expulsion from the body, and if an officer or employee to dismissal from the service of the Senate and to punishment for contempt. So I would correct.
Bring it on. Is that right, nigger boy?
There is no rule. There is clearly a rule that applies.
Then apply the rule and bring the charges.
Donation style, you are certainly more than welcome to still do that. I'm going to give this back to Bailey, and she can tell you how.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, we absolutely love bringing you these live coverage and the latest updates with these.
Well, I'm going to take him at his word, particularly him saying that these comments were misconstrued. And I also think it's important that I know him personally, and he certainly is not a racist. He doesn't have issues with people of color, and I think it's important to note that he will not become the poster child for race in this country.
For Tax Fairness, Credo Action, and Democracy for America delivered more than 270,000 petitions to Congress from our supporters. You sent a clear message to Washington: end offshore corporate tax dodging. Make corporations start paying their fair share of taxes.
To Americans for Tax Fairness, to Credo, to Democracy for America, thank you. This is the kind of thing that makes a real difference. Look, the people who signed this petition, they paid their fair share. Small businesses around this country, they paid their fair share. It is not right for a handful of giant corporations who are making big money to be able to hire an army of lawyers and lobbyists and end up not paying their fair share of taxes. It is time to stop inversions, and this is how we start. We make sure that the voices heard around here are not just voices that are being paid for by the big corporations. They're the voices of America. That's how we're going to make change. Thank you.
Director Comey.
Thank you.
Clearly departed from FBI and department norms, and his decisions negatively impacted the perception of the FBI and the department as fair administrators of justice. Director Comey concealed from the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General his intention to make a unilateral announcement in July 2016 about the reasons for his recommendation not to prosecute former Secretary Clinton. His July 5th statement included inappropriate commentary about uncharged conduct, announced his views on what a quote-unquote reasonable prosecutor would do, and served to confuse rather than clarify public understanding of his recommendation or what the prosecutors had assessed in terms of the evidence. In late October, he again acted without adequately consulting department leadership and contrary to important department norms when he sent a letter to Congress announcing renewed investigative activity days before the election. There are many lessons to be learned from the department's and the FBI's handling of the Clinton email investigation. But among the most important is the need to respect the institution's hierarchy and structure and to follow established policies,
Chairman,
procedures,
I want to thank Mr. Horowitz. It's been a long day. I think you're going on 7 hours here with very little respite from that, but I think you've handled yourself well, and we very much appreciate that. You know, at the beginning of this hearing, I posed the question, why should Americans care about what we're talking about here today? And unfortunately, I think we heard from some of our members that we don't care about these emails anymore. We don't care about these GD emails and texts, I assume they're referring to as well, from Mr. Strzok and Ms. Page. But I'd like everyone here to think about, what if the shoe was on their foot? What if high-ranking people in the nation's most important law enforcement organization were talking about an investigation into them, and they showed that kind of animus, that kind of bias in the process? You, Mr. Horowitz, have a number of times today made it very clear that you understand how important it is that the American people have the assurance that when it comes to the enforcement of our laws, that justice is blind, and that the guarantee of our Constitution of equality under the law for all people is fulfilled. I don't think we can say that here right now, unfortunately, about this very sorry circumstance. And we're going to continue to pursue this until we have the assurance that the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Department of Justice have cleaned house and are making the necessary changes to ensure that in the future, whether it's the 2020 presidential election or whether it's Jane Doe or Joe Smith's criminal investigation, that they will indeed experience equality under the law.
Is that the Director of National Intelligence in March did directly lie to Congress, which is against the law. He said that they were not collecting any data on American citizens.
You're talking about James Clapper.
And it turns out they're collecting billions of data on phone calls every day. So it was a lie. What I'm saying is that by lying to Congress, which is against the law, he's severely damaged the credibility of the entire Intelligence Committee. Community.
What should be done about that? I mean, I know that Mr. Clapper went on another network and said that his response, and I know what you're talking about. You're talking about Senator Ron Wyden's question about data collection on millions of Americans. That's when Mr. Clapper gave that response. He went on the Andrea Mitchell program and said it was the least untruthful answer he could give. I'm guessing here that you're saying that that's not satisfactory for you. Should the president ask for his resignation?
I can't imagine how he can regain his credibility. When you lie, when you frankly come in front of the Senate and a senator asks you a direct question, which, by the way, he was warned of. According to Senator Wyden's office, they called the Director of National Intelligence and said, we're going to ask you this question. So even though he was told in advance he would get the question, he still lied in a public hearing. I think there needs to be an open debate, and Americans need to decide, are you willing to give up the data on all of your phone calls every day, all the time, because of your fear for terrorism? Or do you think, like I do, that you can catch terrorists and have the Bill of Rights at the same time? I frankly think you can have both.
So should Mr. Clapper resign, do you think?
Well, you know, the president has to decide that. I don't get a choice to decide.
If you were president, would you ask for his resignation?
Yes, he would not work in my administration because
we've learned by now that Comey and Clapper and Yates and Obama and Clinton and Steele dossier and John McCain and Loretta Lynch and all of these guys that, you know, Cheryl Mills and Hillary's lawyer, that is, we're all pretty much caught in their biggest lie so far. I wonder what happened to the Russia thing. Well, now we're on to more of what the IRS should be doing for tax evasion and finance committee laws, and they go and raid the president's attorney, which has never been done. Seems like they're going down a lot of roads that have never been done before, trying to catch the president so they can possibly impeach him at some point down the road. I think they're going to have a really hard time with that because Americans are flat pissed off, and we're not stupid. One of their stories this morning by the Washington Compost claimed that Americans all want to see Trump's tax returns and his IRS records and stuff. They couldn't get them any other way, so they had to bring in New York to do it. And I think we pretty much figured out that that's just another plan for them to look at business dealings of the president that they couldn't get otherwise. And this is too far. All of Mueller's witnesses, from Rosenstein down to Clapper and Yates and Brennan and all of those guys, they're pretty much, their testimony is garbage because they've all been caught lying, and their credibility is definitely damaged. Comey's book is definitely going to damage his credibility, and Rosenstein, being a pal of all these guys and being the boss of Mueller, is going to damage his. They have no real evidence. They have no real witnesses, so they're digging around in campaign finance laws. And Mueller continues to step over the dead bodies of the Clinton administration and the Obama administration to go after a sitting president. This is all bogus. I hope Americans don't fall for their bullshit on this. I know I won't. And I think pretty much anybody else who's followed all of these stories got it quite understood that this is just another witch hunt and another rabbit hole to take us down. Mueller won't even say how much money he's cost us by now, which is up in the $7 and $8 million bracket, and won't release the financial records on that. Judicial Watch is doing their best to try to keep up with filing on freedom of information, and they're getting little by little, but yet Nunes and Congress are getting little bits of over 1 million pieces of information that the FBI and the DOJ refuse to turn over. This is going to get a little sticky come the midterms, because Democrats are going to try to play on this as though Trump is a crook, and using Stormy Daniels, a consensual affair from 12 years ago, as bait to fool the nation into voting Democrat. Well, I'll tell you what, they've damaged themselves pretty good all by themselves. They've been proven out to be liars and crooks and rogues and just, you know, gone rogue. I mean, they're out to take away your tax returns that you got, your tax reform that just happened. They want to take back control any way they can get it. And if we fall for that and go against what the president is doing, it'll defeat the purpose of electing Donald Trump. So this is why it's very, very important that we get out to vote in November and only vote constitutional-minded Republicans, and vote out as many Democrats as we possibly can on your local level, your state level, and of course the federal level. We've got to put Dianne Feinstein, Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, Gillibrand, and Corker and Flake and McCain. All their heads need to be on the chopping block. Bernie Sanders. These guys are out to destroy the country and to destroy what President Trump is trying to do for America by making it great again.
And a central part of his theme, of course, is that our politics is corrupted by big money and our economy is rigged by those same interests, so it doesn't work for you. And he has legitimacy in talking about that because of the way he's funding his campaign. On the Republican side, Trump is the billionaire, right? He's self-funding his campaign. So he says to Republicans, these guys are all corrupt. I've been in that business. I've given money to politicians. They're bought and sold. I'm independent. I'll tell you the real truth. So both of them initially established their independence and their credibility as messengers. And then both of them went after what has been the bipartisan center of a failed economic policy. Trump going after trade, Bernie going after trade, and the big banks, and the way that the system had gotten rigged. And so there's kind of parallels on both sides that are fascinating. Now, there's huge differences, obviously. Trump is has played the Republican Party's racial politics perfectly. So Republicans built their base of working people as a party of white inclusion based in the South. And they did it with dog whistle politics. First they did it kind of racially in the early years, and then it was cut welfare, which meant black people, cut spending, which meant black people. So Trump has done build the wall.
Willie Horton, welfare queens,
yeah.
All of the dog whistle terms.
Right. So Trump has done build the wall. Mexicans are sending their rapists to us. Keep Muslims out, right? Don't let them in ever, because we don't know they're all terrorists. So it's perfect dog whistle racist politics, which appeals to a very hard-pressed voting base in the Republican Party that has been built over years. It's not that he can tap into.
And certainly since the Obama election took on a different hue because they combined the collapse with a black president to sort of fuse together those racial themes with anger at the the other.
And the entire party is blame Obama 24/7.
Yeah.
This bitch is fucking out of control.
The chair may do so, but we will limit it to that before we go back to Senator Harris.
Very good. That's the right result.
Sir, please answer the question.
I don't know everyone who works at that law firm, Senator.
And have you had any discussion with anyone ever about Bob Mueller and or his investigation?
So you said Bob Mueller, so have I ever had a discussion about Bob Mueller? I used to work in the administration with Bob Mueller.
What about his investigation? Have you had a conversation with anyone about his investigation?
I'm sure I've talked to fellow judges.
Anyone aside from fellow judges?
About Bob Mueller?
About his investigation, sir. I'll ask again.
But
I asked the question just a minute ago. I'm surprised you forgot.
What a self-righteous fucking cunt, huh? She just thinks she's all that in a bag of chips. That's what's wrong with America right there. Women who get into politics and turn into vicious fucking pieces of shit like this.
Have you had this conversation with anyone about the investigation that Bob Mueller is conducting regarding Russia interference with our election or any other matter?
The fact that it's ongoing, it's a topic in the news every day. I talked to
probably 100 people about it.
Fellow judges about it. It's in our, it's in the courthouse in the District of Columbia. So I guess the answer to that is yes. So the answer is yes.
Okay. And did you talk with anyone at Kasowitz, Benson, and Torres?
You asked me that. I need to know who works there.
I think you can answer the question without...
What are you, a fucking mind reader too now, you fucking cunt?
Me giving you a list of all employees of that.
Somebody kick her in the fucking face.
Well, actually, I can't.
Why not?
Because I don't know who works there.
So that's the only way you would know who you spoke with?
Well, yeah. What is he supposed to just say? Yeah, I know everybody at every law firm in Washington, D.C. because you seem to think I do. Ask the fucking question or shut the fuck up, you stupid cunt.
I want to understand your response to my question, because it's a very direct one. Did you speak with anyone at that law firm about the Mueller investigation? It's a very direct question.
Right, I'd be surprised, but I don't know anyone. I don't know if I don't know everyone who works at that law firm. So I just want to be careful because your question was and or. So I want to be very literal.
That's fine. I'll ask a more direct question if that's helpful to you. Did you speak with anyone at that law firm about Bob Mueller's investigation?
I'm not remembering anything like that, but I want to know
who you're talking about
of people, and I want to know more.
So you're not denying that you spoke with anyone?
Well, I said I don't remember anything like that.
Okay, I'll move on. Okay. Clearly, you're not going to answer the question.
Joining us now with more on tonight's breaking news. He is the host of CRTV's Levin TV, the host of Life, Liberty Levin, right here, Sunday night, the #1 show in its time slot on the Fox News channel. We call him the Great One, Mark Levin. Mark, let's start with the president and the hysteria that came out last week. And the so-called experts have been so wrong the entire time.
Well, the president's actually in great shape when it comes to the law and when it comes to impeachment. On impeachment, all we have to do is vote and make sure the Democrats don't win, and then he won't be impeached. There's an idea. Anyway, that's the headline, though. The president is in very good shape. You cannot impeach a president on events that occurred before he was president. I don't know if people are aware of this. The precedent is Vice President Collyer case in 1873. Judges, different presidents, vice presidents, on events that occurred beforehand. So even if they load up their phony list, we ought to keep that in mind. Also, there's serious doubt on whether Mr. Mueller in his report can use grand jury information that goes public. Remember, grand juries are secret. Grand jury information is supposed to be secret. There's a big case going on now in Washington, D.C. relating to this. Congress passed a statute to keep this information secret because when an individual is in front of a grand jury. They don't have a lawyer. The other side can't be told. There's no counter to what the government's doing. So they're going to have a big hurdle, I think, to get over it, to even allow the information that's in front of a grand jury to get to the American people by way of Mr. Rosenstein, because that is a miscarriage of justice. What else? Obstruction of justice. I'm going through what they've been arguing. President cannot obstruct justice for firing a subordinate, period. Now, what about this new thing they've come up, conspiracy to defraud an election? Well, I'd like to know this conspiracy, exactly who did the president conspire with? Who is it? Have they been charged? Have they been prosecuted? Who did the president conspire with? He didn't conspire with anybody because there is no such thing. And of course, the big enchilada, which is a sitting president cannot be indicted, which I've been saying for 18 months, which makes all of this entirely bogus. Now let's move to the Southern District of New York. They're pursuing campaign violations that did not occur. While I agree with aspects of what Professor Dershowitz said, I disagree with this. These are not crimes, period. Intent, who paid whom, doesn't matter. These are events that are not defined as campaign violations. But I would ask the geniuses in the Southern District of New York, which candidates have you or any other U.S. attorney prosecuted for violating these laws when they used private funds or corporate funds to settle a private legal matter? Can you give me one? Can you name 1, 2, 3, 4? If this is the law, I assume you've used it on a whole bunch of other people. Well, where's the case law? Because I don't see that. Now, the one area that bugs me is the New York Attorney General, who's a hack, and the DA in Manhattan, who's another hack. These are elected Democrats. So they can look at these areas too. The federal immunity on indictment doesn't necessarily apply to them. If I were the president, I'd look across the United States and I would hire the 5 or 6 toughest, smartest, most aggressive litigators in the country. I'd pull them together around my table and I would say, I want you to do everything you can to go on the offensive against these political prosecutors. I don't care if you have to drag out their cases. I don't care how many motions you have to file. It's time to go on offense against these political phony prosecutors in the state of New York and in Manhattan.